Is the ass of your Aston creaking? Let me show you what to do about it. In this episode of Aston1936.com, I'm going to do another video about suspension components. And for years, my 2005 Aston Martin DB9 coupe has been developing a creak coming from the rear suspension. And generally I hear it when I go over a large bump, like a speed bump, or I'm going up into a driveway where there's a ramp and the rear suspension has to flex quite a ways. And the sound, the creak, usually happens when it's colder, and it's really reminiscent to the creak that happens quite frequently in the front suspension of our cars. And I've covered a video on replacing the front suspension and bushings before. It'll be linked up here, and you'll see some great footage of how I actually capture what the sound is and what the issue with the bushing is. So basically, in the suspension bushing design, Aston has these things pressed in, but there's a sort of a Teflon, some sort of hard plastic ring, and these bushes start to creep out of the socket. They aren't mounted firmly enough inside the socket. So then what you start to get is the arm creeping and creaking over top the bush itself. So I think I probably have that same scenario going on in my rear suspension. So I've gone ahead and purchased a set of rear upper control arms, left and right, for my DB9. I got them from Aston Martin. So these are OEM parts. You can't just get the bushings, which is a bit disappointing that Aston doesn't sell a replacement bushing. I could just press these out and press in a new set. But I want to keep my car suspension feeling the same. I know there are now polyurethane bushing kits that are available. So if you don't want to spend as much money as these parts are on your car and you want to just rebush it, you could get yourself a set of the poly bushings. You'll probably see me do a video on how to replace the bushings sometime in the near future. But in the meantime, I'm going to do the OEM approach. I've also got some new bolts and nuts, and I will cover that in a moment when we get to the parts descriptions. If you're wondering if this is a DIY project, absolutely. It's just a couple of wrenches, taking the wheel off and getting in and doing some work. So I think just about any owner can do it. So let's move on, and I can show you the tools and parts you're going to need to get the project completed. So let's take a look at the parts we need to do the upper control arms for the rear suspension. Now, I've already done the right rear because I wanted to learn how to do it so I'd look a little more knowledgeable on video. So here's my old right rear and my brand new left rear. So parts-wise, though, here's what we need. It's two separate parts. So we've got a 4G43 5K743-BC for revision for the left rear. And we've got the exact same part number, 4G43 5K742. That's the only digit to change, revision BC. So those are the two arms you need. They're wicked expensive. These are $700 each. So it's $1,400 US for a pair of upper control arms from Scuderia Parts online. Another piece that they recommend that you fit are replacing the bolts. So you can see I've got a new bolts here. Here's the old bolts there. And here's the parts, and I'll have these on screen. These aren't very expensive, probably $6 or $8 a set. So the bolts and the different nuts that you might, I think it's two different types of bolts. This style bolt, this longer bolt, and then that's the same nut. You need 3 for each side. So I'll have those linked down below. Also, it's always handy to have the official Aston Martin owner's manual, workshop manual guide. This is where I'm going to get the torque specs that I will share with you during the video. So let's check out the tools we're going to need next. We need some pretty basic hand tools to get the job done. We're going to need a 15mm box end. We're going to need an 18mm combo wrench. You're going to need a ratchet. I have my trusty bendy head 3/8 ratchet and a couple of extensions. We're going to need 3 sizes of sockets. We need a 18 millimeter, a 15 millimeter, and a 13 millimeter. We also need one trusty 10 millimeter wrench. I've got my work light as usual. You need a torque wrench that can go as low as 23 Newton meters and up to as high as 115 Newton meters. And a shop rag is always a handy thing. And some instructions, but you'll be watching my video, so all you're going to need to know is what the torque settings are. All right, well, let's dig in and get inside the car and get the old arm off. All right, so a few prerequisites before we get started. Obviously, you can get your car up off the ground. You don't need a lift. You could just use a jack stand if needed. So get it up off the ground, remove your road wheel, and remove your inner wheel arch liner. We need to do that to be able to access a couple of the bolts. So I have videos to all of those things up here you'll find linked. So let's get started. And the first thing we're going to do is use a tool that wasn't in my tool video. We need an 8 millimeter. We have to loosen this bracket. So this is an 8 millimeter socket and 1/4 inch drive. And these aren't going to be too tight. And the reason we're taking this bracket off is we need to be able to get in here. And this goes right through where we're at. So we need some flexibility on these brake lines. We don't need to remove the brake lines. We just need to loosen off this bracket. And that gives us all the adjustability we need. Next up, and maybe cameraman Rob can switch sides, we have this. This is the ride height sensor drop link, and we need to loosen it off and disconnect it completely because it actually attaches to the upper control arm. So ride height sensor disconnected. This is sloppy. So we basically have this bolt at the front that connects the upper control arm to the wheel hub. And we have 2 more bolts in the back. So I'm going to go after this guy next, and we'll loosen this off. And that uses a 15 mil socket on the end towards the front of the car and an 18 wrench to hold it at the back. And you should be able to just push this in and out with a little bit of pressure. And away comes the hub. Now notice how this sprung up. Now remember, the suspension is hanging right now, and the upper control arm is designed that it doesn't just free pivot, it actually has to be torqued in place with the suspension loaded, and it should have some rubber resistance around its center line. And that's what we've got here. So basically it's sprung up to its loaded height, and so now there's no load on here other than we just need to undo these last 2 bolts. So I'm going to try and loosen these off now. The nut is an 18, the bolt head is a 15. Cameraman Rob will probably be able to tell me if the bolt starts turning, but what you'll likely find is that you can get started, and you can see that the arm just dropped because I took the torque off this bolt. Okay, so now that's spinning. So I am going to get my 15 just to hold that end, and I'm cheating, I'm using 2 ratchets. And that's out. We'll do the same on the other side. So the challenge here is that this 18 is tucked away behind the suspension spring. So I'm hoping that won't spin, or I'm just going to try to crack it loose with the 15 on the bolt end, and we'll see what happens next. Yeah, so it's starting to spin on the 18 end. So it's not exactly perfect, but I've got an 18 millimeter wrench where I've just got the teeth. Since the torque has kind of gone off the nut already, it doesn't take anything other than I'm just holding the resistance on the nylock. So I just have it barely biting, but that's enough. And there we go. So now we need to get the bolts out, and you can see why I needed some flexibility on this. I can You can remove one bolt at a time. So I can pull that one all the way out. And now I should be able to work this one all the way out. It's stuck just a little bit. I'm gonna use a screwdriver just to give it a little prise along. I'm not reusing these bolts anyway, right? Yeah, so you should be able to just pry these out, or you could even try and get in and knock them out. It might also help just to wiggle the arm on the passenger side or the right side of the car. Yeah, I was able just to wiggle it out by hand. And that's that. And the final step is just literally to lift it out. Let's have a look at this over on the bench. So you can see, there's rubber bush in here. That's that has play for the vertical link of the wheel bearing hub. And then these two bushings at the back here should be frozen solidly in the frame, but you can see just slightly here this gap that's forming. Well, that's part of the problem. That's what's causing part of my creak. And if we look here over on my right side one, you can actually see at least a millimeter, maybe a millimeter of half gap that's formed on this bushing. This bushing is slipping, and it's frozen by the center metal barrel between the bolts. So and it should just be sitting there using the rubber of the bushing to resist any motion up or down. Well, this is floating now. And that's the creak we're hearing, is that basically the aluminum frame of the arm is floating over this bushing body. And that's the creak we hear. And the sign that you'll usually see if you can just look in and inspect your suspension is if this isn't flush, like it is there, this is bushing creep. And this probably needs to be repaired. So I do a couple of steps to prepare before I put it back in the car. I'm going to use just a little basic lubricant. You could use engine oil. I'm just going to hit the ends of these threads with a little lube to help the nuts go on. And I'm going to use a little white lithium grease just to get on the barrel of the bolt where it passes through. And I'm doing that mostly to aid in assembly, but a little bit just to help prevent corrosion in the future. It's just simple white lithium grease. Here's our new control arm. The bushing here, considerably stiffer. Here I can twist that. I can barely make that move. There we go. Obviously it's got 20 years of wear on it, about 53,000 miles. So time to put the new kit in the block back in, and let's go over to the car and fit one of these up with one of the bolts. So it's just basically going back in the way we took it out. And you may need to just find the sweet spot. Here's my new bolt. Got that in place. It really pays to take the time and put on that little extra bit of lubricant on the shafts. That step just goes so much easier. Just gonna finger start these nuts. Now this back one's probably gonna be a bit of a dexterity test. That's that. So a little resistance now on the nut, but I've still managed to find a way to get the head of the 18 wrench over it, just enough to freeze it while the nylock part bites. And then once it makes contact, that it's all the way in. Yeah, there we go. It probably won't be a big deal at all. It won't spin anymore. Okay, and we don't want to tighten this up yet, says the factory manuals, because remember we want to tighten this in the suspension settled position. So that's snug right in there, and I can still move it. So that's good enough. Now we'll go after the other side. Just snug. Still adjust the arm. So next up, we want to get this bushing into the upper, and it's a tight fit. You have to have this bushing exactly square to the slot that it's going into, and you know, it has full sort of adjustability. There we go. So a little bit of tweaking like that, and then bolt goes from the front of the car towards the back of the car. Put the wooden skin in there. We want that a little bit loose still, so when we settle the suspension, when we torque everything, it'll all be in its final resting place before we tighten up these 3 bolts. So to get the car in a loaded suspension state and to be able to access these nuts, you could try to put the wheel on and get up in there, but that's just a total nightmare. I've tried to do that in the past. So what I found is if you could use some combination of your jack and your jack stand. Well, I have a jack stand here, and I am going to basically lower the car down onto the jack stand and let the car keep sagging until all the weight's back on the rear suspension. So with a lift, I'm actually going to look for a little gap forming so I know half the weight's on the back of the car. And if cameraman Rob pans across, you need to do both sides at the same time because there's a sway bar that links both your suspensions together. So we definitely want to have that side done. So if you haven't already, go do your other side upper control arm, get to the same point where you're ready to torque the bolts. So let me lower the car down. You can watch the suspension take up the load. Here we go. Looks like it's off the lift. So while we're loaded up then, I'm going to take my torque wrench at 115 Newton meters, and I'm going to go for the bolt heads. I suspect these nuts are not going to move because they're already sort of snugged into place. And got to be getting close. It's getting pretty hard. 99.
It's 112 there. There you go.
So now we're going to do the mount to vertical link, and that'll stop turning once it gets its first bit of bite. And this is torqued to 90 Newton meters. Easy peasy. So 115, 115, 90, all torqued up. Now we can go do the other side, and then we'll raise the car back up and I'll put a few of the auxiliaries back on again. All right, so we'll put the ride height sensor bolt back. You see I put a little bit of lubricant on the threads again like I did for all the other bolts. Feed this through. Gonna get the nut started by hand. Get my 10 millimeter on the bolt head. And then this torques to 23 Newton meters. And the final step is just getting my brake line bracket reattached. These are the 8 millimeters. And we're just going to use the official Aston Martin 1936 snug. All right, well, that wasn't too difficult. I'd probably say all in, you might want to plan for an hour. The next steps obviously are reinstall your fender liner, get that button back up, get your road wheel back on and get it back on the ground. Make sure you torque your road wheels up to the right torque settings. I have videos to all of those things that I'll link up here. You know, that was a pretty nice upgrade, but it's pretty pricey, $700 a side. I am going to tell you in an upcoming video, I'm going to show you how to fit polyurethane bushings to the front suspension because I'm not willing to spend the kind of money I need for the front. So maybe if you're going to just try to refurbish your rear upper control arms, you can also consider the PowerFlex bushings for that. But for me, I went all stock on the back here right now. I'm pretty happy, all buttoned up, and I can't wait to get this back down on the ground and give it a ride. So down here, you're going to find a link to my companion blog article where you'll find all sorts of other information for taking care of your Aston Martin. Up here, you'll find the next video in the series. It'll probably be something like either changing the suspension strut or maybe one of those polyurethane bushing kits. If you like getting videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe. You'll get automatically notified when the next one comes out. And as always, I'd love to hear your comments. If you could please leave those down below. Did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? What are your thoughts? Love to hear it. See you next time.